Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Lion's Den. This is the Weekly Roar. Hey, last weekend, my wife and I got away for the long weekend, of course, traveled only within the region we live in. We headed to one of our favorite wine regions called Valpolicella, and we stayed at a bed and breakfast. It was really interesting adjusting to the way businesses have had to operate now as they begin coming out of the COVID restrictions little by little. So most everything we did was outdoors. Even our winery visits, they took place outside, and when we went out to eat at restaurants, we were sitting on the patio outside too. There were hand sanitizing stations set up everywhere. And of course, we were required to use them every time we arrived somewhere and throughout our visit. While it was the same, it was also a little different with all the precautions going in place. Businesses, they have to comply with their industry standards. So the wineries have standards and the bed and breakfast industry has standards. They all have to comply with these standards for COVID-19 in order to avoid being fined and shut down by the government. So they're very adamant about following these rules. Oh, and one last thing. I cannot count how many times I went to take a sip of a drink with my mask still in place and the straw was poking my mask. I think we need masks that have straw holes in them that are located under the flaps there. So if you don't have a straw, you can cover the hole with the mask. That's a great idea. Anyway, I hope you all were able to get creative in some way and just enjoy the Memorial Day holiday in some form or fashion. Which reminds me, I also wanted to just take this opportunity as a veteran of the armed services to just remind everyone about the differences between Memorial Day and Veterans Day. This happens to me every year without fail. Now, it's pretty easy to remember these differences, but for some reason, I still find people thanking me for my service on Memorial Day. That's really more appropriate for Veterans Day, and here's why. Memorial Day is a day of remembrance. It's a day that our country pauses to reflect on all of the men and women who have given their lives protecting our freedom. They paid the ultimate sacrifice by giving their lives so that we can enjoy the freedoms we do in our country. Now, Veterans Day, on the other hand, is when we recognize all veterans, past and present. We thank them for their service. Whether they're still here with us or whether they've passed away, all veterans are recognized on Veterans Day. So there's the difference between the two, and I hope you understand. Don't thank a veteran on Memorial Day. It makes them feel very awkward, and that holiday is really reserved to pause and reflect on the ultimate sacrifice that our fellow countrymen have given in the name of our freedom, really. So, all right, you guys. Thanks for jumping into the Lion's Den today for the last session in my series, How to Raise a Leader. So over the past 9 weeks, we've talked about several things that leaders can do to help build up and produce more leaders. That's probably one of the most important things that we can take on as leaders is to raise other leaders. So today, I'm going to be discussing the actions that leaders can take in order to make a lasting contribution to leadership. But before we jump into that, of course, I'm Greg Storch. I'm the owner of Lion Enterprise, a leadership development and coaching business where I focus on creating winning work cultures one leader at a time. I'm a certified professional leadership coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. Last week, I spoke about how leaders can get value added to themselves when they're also able to add value to other leaders. I went on to explain how adding value can be this two-way street for leaders who develop their potential leaders. I shared ways that leaders add value to new leaders, and then I also shared some of the value that they receive back by doing that. Now, if you weren't able to join us last Wednesday and you want to watch that episode, or if you just want to watch it over again, or even if you want to share out that episode with other people who might be interested in seeing it, all you have to do is head over to my website at lion-enterprise.com, click up on the Lion's Pride Library, and look for video number 105. And while you're in the Lion's Pride Library, go ahead and poke around in there. Check it out. That's my free resource for all of you, and it's a great way for people to get more of the roar. Well, it's time to continue this leadership series with today's session, The Importance of NextGen Leadership. You know, I used to think that leaders were born. It's actually a pretty common belief. There are a lot of people out there who believe that leaders are born with some innate ability to lead others. And while there may be some people out there who are born with special gifts or talents that help them to be great leaders, I now firmly believe and understand that leadership is a skill that we all can develop. We can learn to be good leaders as long as we're willing to put in the work and become intentional in our actions. I've also learned over the years that leadership isn't about building a group of followers. Leaders who focus solely on building followership are simply limiting themselves, and they're limiting their potential for real success. At the end of the day, a leader who has found success in gaining and producing only followers, well, they'll cease to be successful when they can no longer lead. That makes sense, right? But the leader who focuses on raising other leaders understands the benefit of multiplication. When we raise other leaders, we multiply our influence. I kind of liken it to like a multi-level marketing structure in some sense, where person one influences person two, and then the people that person two influences are now also influenced by person one. So person one has just multiplied their influence. But the key to success in any MLM is the continual process of bringing on more and more people, developing more and more leaders in this case. If person two never develops person three, then the structure eventually dies on the vine and it just ceases to continue. So over the past 9 weeks, I've been talking about all of the things that we need to do as leaders in order to raise other leaders. I spoke on attracting leaders, creating the right environments for them, how we can nurture and train them, and even how to develop them. You even heard about the importance of coaching those potential new leaders, but our work as leaders is not over until we've developed potential leaders to develop yet another generation of leaders. When each generation of leaders is developed by the previous generation of leaders, that's when we know we've made a lasting contribution to the art of leadership. That's when we can enjoy being a successful leader. Before we continue on in this lesson, I want to make a point here. In case you believe that what I'm saying here is that we have to find more people like ourselves in order to achieve some success in leadership, that's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, as leaders, we can develop all sorts of different people into leaders. They don't have to be our mini-me's. As a matter of fact, it will be rather difficult for you to be able to find people with your same temperament, personality, and natural ability to lead. So you're not looking for other people that are just like you. As long as someone shows the following three things, then they're capable of becoming a leader who can develop other leaders. And that's what you're out to find. The first, of course, is desire. People have to have the desire to want to lead if they want to become a leader. There's a lot of people that want nothing to do with being a leader. The strength of their desire will serve as a litmus test for their potential success as a leader. The stronger their desire to lead, the stronger leader they'll become. Effective leaders tend to have a strong desire towards leadership roles and functions. There are plenty of people out there who are content just allowing someone else to take the lead. But leaders, they don't want someone else doing it for them. They want to do it themselves. The second thing is having good relational skills. Now, I've heard it said many times that if you want to know the effectiveness of a leader, then ask those who are led. That's because there aren't any assessments that can assess what makes an effective leader or a model that can determine great leadership. You've probably seen this happen before. I know that I have. I can share some examples of leaders I've seen myself who excelled in one environment and then failed in another, or leaders who were average in one organization and then became excellent leaders somewhere else. One of the reasons that we see this happen is because leadership is a relational skill. It's about how you interact with others. Sometimes we relate well and other times not so much. But how we relate is always having an impact on our leadership effectiveness. So relational skills are the skills that can change our lives and transform our relationships with others. Relational skills are a set of abilities that help us gain understanding, recognize values. It helps us to adjust our attitudes and motivate our actions rightly as it relates to what's going on in the hearts and minds of those around us. Being able to tap into that, those are relational skills. They're more than simple rules of engagement or maps to the world of people. Relational skills let us know at a glance about what's going on inside someone else. Relational skills help us know when to keep quiet and when we can speak up. They provide us with the ability to feel empathy that prevents us all from acting like a bunch of sociopaths. Relational skills make us feel loved, special, that we're understood, and they help us to recover when something goes wrong. People who have relational skills seem to get it, while those who don't have them, well, they don't seem to have a clue. They're called skills because they're just that. Skills. They can be learned and developed and even improved. Okay, the third thing that I wanted to mention is having practical leadership skills. Practical leadership skills are the skills that you have to have in order to be able to lead, and people can get them by seeing these behaviors being modeled for them and by having leaders train and develop those skills in them. So these skills, they'll include things like people management skills, communication skills, And of course, skills in persuading and influencing other people. Potential leaders, well, they come in all different packages, but as long as they show these three things, then they have the potential to not only become a leader, but to develop other leaders as well. And that's what we want to find when we're developing leaders. We should be spending our time developing other leaders who have the skills and desire to continue on to develop the next generation of leaders. So what I want to do is run through some types of potential leaders. And for each one of them, I want to speak about some of the things that we should pay attention to as leaders when we try to develop them into leaders. So let's start out at the very basic scenario. I describe this one as a leader trying to develop a follower, someone who has never led before. As a leader trying to develop a non-leader, there's 4 things that you should pay close attention to. And I'm calling these the 4 E's for developing non-leaders. Catchy, isn't it? The first thing I want you to watch closely is the environment that you're creating for them. That's the first E, environment. Leaders should maintain a positive environment for non-leaders to develop and grow in during their journey to develop into leaders themselves. Without creating this positive environment, your non-leader is going to get intimidated, and frankly, they're going to be scared. Those feelings are what will keep the lid on that leader, and they'll never fully develop into the leader that they should be. So, creating the right positive environment will help non-leaders to learn and try to do new things. It's important that once we create this environment for our non-leaders, that we stay close to them so they can observe the leadership behaviors that we're modeling for them. Now, the second thing is that you have to be encouraging. That's the second D. Think about a time you were learning to do something new, or maybe you had a child who went through this. I remember when my son was old enough to start playing t-ball. He, of course, had no experience with it. It's the beginning levels. It's where you enter the world of baseball. And so when people are in an environment where it seems really foreign to them, well, it can be easy for them to get discouraged, right? That's why it was really important to have the right coach for Stephen. The boys on that t-ball team all needed a coach who encouraged them and reinforced his belief in them to do well. The thing is, when we're in a new environment, learning a new skill, we're going to make mistakes, probably a lot of them, especially when we just start out. So when a leader encourages their non-leaders, when they can express a strong belief in them, they'll be more inclined to persevere through those beginning challenges. Okay, so the third E for our non-leaders is to empower them. Anyone who's new to something will find themselves reluctant to jump in and start performing. That's why it's really important that we empower them straight away. Some of the ways a leader can empower someone who is new to leadership and reluctant to lead is to slowly give them authority in their name. Over time, 2 things will happen. People will begin to see their new leader differently, and the new leader will see themselves differently also. Once they feel truly empowered, over time, they will begin to develop their own authority. So until then, it's important that we share our authority with them. And then the last E is to expose their strengths. When we first start out developing non-leaders into leaders, It's critical that we start out by playing to their strengths. When we play to their strengths, we give them the best opportunity to get some quick wins under their belt. And that's exactly what they need to start to gain some confidence in their leadership. When your non-leader feels a sense of confidence, it can start to accelerate the development process. And it's also going to help them gain traction and build momentum. So those were the 4 E's to focus on if you find yourselves developing a non-leader who shows the characteristics of a potential leader into a leader. Have you ever had a manager on your team who had the potential to become a good leader, but they were stuck thinking like a manager? That's the second scenario I wanted to talk about. We've talked before about the differences between a manager and a leader. You've probably seen some of those infographics on social media before. One of those differences is how they think. So while you may have to slow down when it comes to helping a non-leader become a leader, when you help a manager to do the same thing, you may have to come to a complete stop, because potential leaders who think like managers, they're going to need to develop their relational skills and change their thinking patterns. The reason you may have to completely come to a stop in this process is because you may have to stop what you're doing, walk that person through what you do, and then explain to them why you're doing it. In essence, you're trying to train their brain to think as a leader, not as a manager. When it comes to thinking, good leaders share some common thinking characteristics. Here's 5 of them. First, they think big. Leaders always look at the big picture, and they also understand that their success is only as great as their goals. If they're limited in their thinking, they'll be limited in their success. How big leaders think determines the size of their accomplishments. So as leaders, we have to constantly show those we're developing the big picture and focus on possibilities. Because when a leader can maintain focus on the big picture and away from problems, the people they're developing will start to think big as well. The second characteristic of their thinking is that they think in terms of others. We'd all be rich if we got paid every time I told you that great leaders don't focus on themselves. Good leaders have an other people mindset. They put other people's success before their own. This type of thinking is critical to model in order to develop others. We have to be able to teach them to think in terms of others first, how they can promote them, develop them, and take them along the road to success. The third characteristic of thinking is that they do it continually. Leaders are thinkers. Non-leaders are people who rather sit back and let others handle their thinking for them. Well, not leaders. Good leaders are constantly entertaining new ideas about new resources and how to improve on things and so on. When leaders continually think, they're able to stretch and grow, not only themselves, but their organizations too. It's really important that leaders model this kind of constant thinking, and one of the best ways to promote it to your potential leaders is by asking questions. Constantly asking questions of your potential leaders forces them to think. They have to think of answers to all your questions, and that starts a habit of always thinking. It develops a pattern to think continually. Now, the fourth characteristic of thinking is that leaders think bottom line. Now, others will get wrapped up in all the details, but a leader goes straight for the bottom line. Now, when I say the bottom line, I'm not necessarily referring to money or the budget. When leaders ask their people to give them the bottom line, they're essentially asking to get straight to the point. And when leaders consistently focus on the bottom line, they create an environment where the people they're developing, well, they start to determine what that is before they're even asked for it. You know, the military speaks in large part through the use of acronyms, right? Well, after I retired and was working in the private IT industry, I was working with a former senior military officer from a different branch of service than mine. I hired him as a program manager to oversee one of my contracts up in the Boston area. One day, I received an email from him, and the letters BLUF, all in caps, were right there in front. It didn't say good afternoon, good morning, nothing. It just said BLUF. And it was about some issues with our customer. I had never seen this acronym before, so I had to reply to him and ask him, what was that? I was thinking, like, is this a bluff? Is he bluffing me? What the hell is this? You know what it was? He started out his email right away with bottom line up front. Bluff. See, in the military, that's what his senior officers required from him from a reporting purpose. The bluff acronym was heavily used, and it forced the junior officers to give the bottom line up front. So he got straight to the point because he understood that as a leader of the program, I wanted him to get straight to the bottom line, straight to the point of what was most important for me to know. So the fifth thinking characteristic of good leaders is that they think quickly. Good leaders size it and seize it. They size up a situation quickly and they seize it immediately. Good leaders can do that because they think in terms of the big picture, which we just talked about, but they also do their homework. So they're prepared to make decisions quickly. Now, the last scenario that I wanted to talk about today is when leaders help good leaders to become great ones. Now, there's going to be times when we already have leaders on our teams who are really good, and it's an opportunity for us to help them become great. When leaders get to work with and develop good leaders, they gain momentum. Where a leader has to slow down to help non-leaders and practically come to a stop when developing managers into leaders, they can usually step on the gas when they're helping good leaders to become great ones. Good leaders will almost teach themselves and can pick things up just from proximity to you. If you happen to be so lucky as to have a leader like this, then here are a few things you can do that will help you to develop them into a great leader. I'm not even sure that I have to say this, but I'm gonna do it anyway, just to make sure that you get it. But one of the first things that you must do without hesitation is get them on a personal growth plan. Now, they may already be growing, but chances are they may not have a personal plan for their growth. So I recommend that you really get to know that leader really well. Identify their strengths and their weaknesses. What are their desires? What kind of goals and values do they have? Identify those things and then help them develop a personal growth plan that's specific for them based on those things. Then what you do is you go into a mentor mode, and what you do is periodically check in on their progress, see how they're doing, and then you help them to find necessary adjustments along the way to their development path. Now, this next one I love. It reminds me of the law of the rubber band. We stop growing when we lose the tension between where we are now and where we want to be. So if they're a good leader now and they want to be a great leader, you got to create tension for them. So this next one is to create opportunities for them that will result in stretching them. We all probably already know that when we engage in doing things beyond what we think we're capable of doing, that's when we see some of our greatest growth. And while it's not comfortable to be there, it's necessary if we want to grow. When we force them into a stretch, it can accelerate their development. And the way we force the stretch is to take them out of their comfort zone and pull them into their growth zone. So the biggest thing we can do to help good leaders become great leaders is to focus on their personal growth and provide them with opportunities for them to stretch. By focusing on those two areas, you'll help them move past any point where they never thought they could go. So those are 3 scenarios of 3 different types of people that you could be working for to develop and grow as leaders. Now, they came from all different walks. And just like I said, the leaders are not going to be direct imitations of you. They're not going to be your mini-me's. We talked about taking a follower and turning them into a leader. I called that follower a non-leader. So a non-leader to a leader. Then we talked about helping transition a manager into a leader. And then the last scenario was having a good leader already and helping them to develop into a great one. There's going to come a point in our journeys where we reach our capacity to do more than we're already doing. If you're a leader who's learned how to raise other leaders, then chances are great that you'll be able to accomplish more than your physical limitations will allow you to. Remember what I've said before. We don't achieve anything significant in life without the help of others. And when it comes to raising leaders, the only way we'll be able to continue doing more and more is to do it through other people. So I'm going to wrap up this series and leave you with this one simple question. What are you doing today that is helping to raise our potential leaders for tomorrow? All right, everyone, there you have it. Session 10 in my 10-part series, How to Raise a Leader. Next week, I'm going to spend time providing a recap of the past 10 weeks in my traditional series summary, where I'll highlight all the important takeaways from each of the 10 episodes. You're going to want to catch that for a recap before we move on to what's next. And I invite you to come join me for that recap session so you can also find out what's coming up next in the Lion's Den on the Weekly Roar. We'll see you next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much, everybody, for supporting me and watching the Weekly Roar today. I really hope that you enjoyed my latest series as much as I did. I loved it. I really appreciate you, and thank you so much. Until we meet again next Wednesday, remember, everyone, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.